Yeah, it was like, and I saw him. I saw him the last thing just as he went over the hill, and I knew he was a big deer. And came back to camp, and I was telling my dad, I pulled him aside. I remember it as plain as day. I says, "You ain't gonna believe the deer I saw today."
Welcome back to another episode of Northwoods Whitetails. I'm your host, Joey Davis, with co-host
Izaak Young.
And we're sitting here with Beaver Dragon and Brent Dragon. How we doing, guys?
You're doing good.
Good, real good.
So, little backstory. Why don't you guys tell us about little about yourself, real quick? Where you're from, what you do.
Well, I live in Milton, Vermont. Have all my life. I've lived here for 75 years, I guess. And I raced race cars for 42 years and hunted when I wasn't racing race car most of the time. And I just lived to hunt. And I've never shot a 200-inch deer, but I keep trying. And I've come close, but not close enough.
Yep.
And I've been all over the country. My son and I, we went to Montana for 13 years in a row out there, and we shot some nice bucks out there. We've been to Kansas. We've been to Iowa. We've been to Ohio. You name it, we've been there. And Saskatchewan, Alberta. But I've had a lot of fun doing what I've done, and I got a few of these on the wall that I've shot, but I still don't have the 200-inch deer.
I think a few is an understatement.
Well,
to say the least.
they're close, but not close
Is
enough.
there got to be
And-
60 heads in here? 50?
Yeah, I think there's about 75.
Oh.
I think.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that I think it's somewhere like that. But anyways,
Pretty impressive.
But I've had fun doing what I did, and I can't wait to get going again this year. Back when I was younger, I used to do some tracking and stuff. Tried to. I didn't mount too much, but I chased a lot of deer around, and once in a while, they'd make a mistake, and I'd get one. But as you get older, you can't do that. And I'm 80, going on 83 years old, and it's harder every day.
Yeah.
But anyways, Brent tells me, that, we went 10 miles today. We went 15 miles. Oh, Jesus, I couldn't do that. I couldn't go that far in a week now, but I used to. So, but he's the hunter.
Yeah.
He's shot a lot of deer too.
Yeah, we've been pretty lucky. We've got to go around the country, a lot of different places. And when he was off in Saskatchewan and Alberta, he did a lot of that. I was back here in Milton, and I pretty much really got involved. We went to the Benoit's house one time, and it sort of set me off as far as I wanted to learn how to track a deer. So I pretty much did that on my own. I can remember he was in Saskatchewan one year, and there was a buck here just not very far up the road. I bow hunted. He was a 10-pointer, which we don't have many 10-pointers.
Yeah, right.
And I missed him at 20 yards with my bow. I was shaking so bad. And I never had a deer that close that big. And I was some discouraged. And we got into the winter. And we had a snow. It was a Thanksgiving day, and I had to be to Thanksgiving dinner by 4 o'clock is what my wife had told me. Be there for 4 o'clock. And I took off and went up the road, and there's a swamp that this deer used to hang around. Got into it and found his track, and I took him, and we ended up in the next town, came all the way back, and I probably was within a half mile of my truck, and I left his track, and I cut him. I made a circle out around him. And just lucky, we came face to face at the top of the hill, and I shot him. And that deer was over 200. I think it was 207, if I remember right.
Wow.
Yeah, for a Chittenden County deer, that was a big deal. 10 points.
Yep.
Especially for around here.
For around here,
That's a really good deer.
Yeah.
It was.
and that's where I got hooked on it, and that was probably I'm guessing that was probably in the 90s, 96, 97 time frame.
Did you make it to
Yeah,
Thanksgiving dinner?
Maybe a little.
I did in time. I did. Yeah. I didn't have to drag far. It was all downhill. So
Perfect.
Not
yeah,
good.
it was pretty easy. And that's where I got hooked into it.
You've got that deer mounted, right?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
I
would
did-
make
I-
a Vermont buck too. He's
Yeah. It was. I figured I wasn't going to get many more shots at 10 pointers in Vermont.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
You shot another nice Vermont buck around here though too.
yeah,
A real nice one.
I got an 8-pointer.
Yeah.
That was over 200.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he had long tines. The 10-pointer was very short tined.
Yeah.
But that was another one that was basically on the opposite side of town.
Yeah.
And that one, it was on dry ground.
Yeah.
Just sort of happened to stumble across him, knew he was there,
Yeah.
and walked right onto him, and that was the end of that one.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
you
Perfect.
can't kill the big ones if you're not with them. Not in the
That's
right woods
right.
with them.
That's
No.
true. That's true.
Yep.
The biggest one I ever shot, I shot with Jim Shockey, the guy that's on television. I hunted 3 times with him in Saskatchewan, and I learned a lot about their operation. They had 2 different hunting camps. One was a north camp, and one was a south camp. Well, I'd been going to the north camp. Yeah, I saw deer, but I didn't see, the deer that they were seeing in the south camp. Well, a friend of mine, Ramo Pizzagalli, was at one time he was an investor for Jim Shockey to get Jim Shockey started, and to get what he wanted out of it, he took it in hunts with Shockey. So he went 3-4 times, and he learned a lot. Of course, they put him in the best places there was. Well, was quite a while ago now. But anyways, I was talking to Remo one day, and I said, I want to go back. I want to go back and hunt with Shockey again. And he says, I can fix you up. And he says, that's not a problem. He said, I can fix you up, and it won't cost you nothing. I said, what do you mean it won't cost me nothing? He said, he owes me some credits. And he says, I'm not going back. But he says, I want you to know that you're not going to go to the north camp. He said, you're going to hunt in the south camp. And I said, well, what's the difference? A lot of difference. He said, the north camp shot out. And he says, the south camp isn't. And he says, I'm going to call right now, and we're going to get hold of the guy we need to talk to. It won't be Shockey, but he says I'll talk to the right guy. So he calls this guy, and he gets him on the phone, and he says, I got this guy that's going to come in my place, and he wants to shoot a deer, but he says, you're going to take him to the south camp. Yes, he says, I will, Mr. Pizzagalli. He says, I'll take him to the south camp. So we get there, fly up there, get driven to the camp, which is like 4 hours from the airport. And unbeknown to me, Greg Ritz was going to hunt with Shockey that week too. And I didn't know Greg Ritz. He owns Thompson Center in Rochester, New Hampshire. And we all get to the camp, and it's 40 below zero, whatever it was. It was cold. And we all get out of the car, and first thing Ritz says, he says, we need to shoot our guns. He said, we've been flying, and he said, we don't know how they got thrown around, and he said, we're going to shoot our guns. And I had just barely bought a brand new Thompson Center Katahdin, and that's what Ritz had. So I said, yeah, I'd like to shoot mine too. And so anyways, Ritz gets his gun out, and I get mine out, and all of it, the whole bunch of us that were there, we all decided we're going to shoot 100 yards. Oh, Ritz stands up there offhand, boom, he dead center. Oh, I said, that's a pretty good shooter at 100 yards with a muzzleloader.
Yep.
And I had this muzzleloader I just bought, and after the second shot, you couldn't load it because I was using wrong powder and all this stuff. It was corroding it all up. Well, anyways, he says to the guy that was in charge of the target, he says, put a target up 200 yards. And I said, he ain't going to shoot 200 yards, is he? Yeah. Pulls up like that, boom, dead center. I didn't want to shoot after that. I don't need to shoot. My gun's fine. But I did. And so I said to him, I said, Greg, we need to talk. When we get inside, he said, we'll talk. I said, okay. So we get inside, and he said, I'm going to ask you some questions. And he said, I want you to write this all down. I said, okay. I said, I just bought a brand new Katahdin. And I said, after the second shot, I have an awful job to load it because it's corroded up so bad. Yeah, he says, I know what your problem is. He says, you're using probably pellets. I said, I am. He said, they're junk. He said, they're no good. I said, well, what do I use? Blackhorn 209. I said, I've never heard of it. He said, you can buy it anywhere. That's okay. So I wrote down 209, loose powder.
What year was this, do you think?
Oh, my God. This was 15 years ago.
Right, so you were way ahead of the curve then.
Oh,
'Cause
it was longer than 15 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
It was
Yeah.
longer than 15?
Oh, God, yeah.
It
Yeah.
was?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was a long time
but
ago.
Yeah,
my
we-
point is, Blackhorn has just become very popular within like the last five
Yeah,
years, maybe.
Yeah, and even more
Oh,
so.
longer than that.
Well,
Well,
no, but
no.
wasn't it? Who
Pirate-
just
Pyredex,
Pyredex.
777.
just bought them, right?
Yeah.
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 Well, anyways,
Yeah.
he says, write down 209 loose powder, 209 Blackhorn powder. I said, okay. So I said, now what do I shoot for bullets? He said, well, what were you shooting? I said, I was shooting the
Power belts?
Thompson Center.
they're Thompson Center Super Glides, but they were 275 grain. He said, there's nothing wrong with that bullet, but he says, I want you to switch to 300 grain. And I looked at him, I said, Greg, I said, they're going to drop. No, they're not going to drop. Listen to me. He said, okay. So I write down 300. I said, how many grains of powder? He says, 120 grains of loose powder. It's okay. So I said, what about primers now? He said, well, he says, I want you to use shotgun Magnum primers. Okay? And he says, you won't have a problem loading your gun. I said, I don't believe that. And I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, anyways, so I shot a deer. I don't know if he shot one. I don't remember. But anyways, I came home, and he said, you can shoot as many shots as you want, and it will not corrode up, and you'll be able to load it just like you did the first shot. I said, I'm going to find out. So I went over to my friends over here, Ed Robinson's farm. I shot 32 times right in a row. I loaded it 32 times, and it loaded just as easy the 32nd time as it did the first time.
No kidding.
And I wouldn't go away from that powder for anything. I've
Yep.
shot a lot of deer with that little gun.
Yep. Yep.
And it was all just knowing what to use the right stuff.
Yep. You still have that gun.
Oh, I still have that gun. Yes, I do.
Yep. That's like your favorite muzzleloader still.
It's the only muzzleloader I got now. I sold the other ones.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you were with Shockey, did you? How did you do? I mean, you
That deer right there is the biggest deer that's in. It was in this year. It was 304 pounds dressed.
no kidding.
But look at the horns.
Yep.
Yeah.
He got hit by a car, and they knew that.
Huh.
Yep.
And they said the horns are screwed up, and if you see him, you shoot him because we want him out of there. I rattled him in the first day,
No kidding.
and he would dress 304. They put him on the brochure on their book up
Wow.
there.
Wow. What did they drag him by hand to get him out of there? They
No,
hooked
no,
four-wheeler on him
they,
or something.
They had me in a tent,
Yeah.
and they came in with one of them side-by-side things.
Yep.
And we picked him right up. He dropped right on the pile when I shot him.
No kidding.
And we took him down and we set him all up. They wanted to set him all up with bales of hay and stuff like that to
Yeah.
take the pictures for their book.
Yeah.
And they did. They put him on. But I wish I'd never shot him. I mean, he's only a 10 point, but
I can tell you, there's not a lot of people that can say they killed a buck over 300 pounds.
Not many.
he dressed 304 pounds, and they knew it.
that's
And you
huge.
could tell it when he walked in. I knew right off that was a
just-
deer. He was so big.
Yeah. Even
But-
in that country, that is huge.
It
That
is
a
huge. Yes,
body
it
deer.
is.
Just
It
a
is.
giant, huh?
The rest of them, no, I've shot some 200s, over 200s, but not like that thing.
Yeah. So did you ever see any great big racks when you were up there?
Oh, my God. The last time I was there, the last time I was in Saskatchewan, I got there and my guide we talked with the guide and stuff, and he says, I got a place for you. He says, we're 13 miles from here. He said, we're going to be going by four-wheeler 13 and a half miles tomorrow morning, and tomorrow night I'm going to pick you up, and you're going to ride out 13 and a half miles. It's okay. And it was 30 plus below zero.
What is this country like? Is it like Ontario? What is Saskatchewan?
A lot like it's some like Ontario, not as swampy.
Yeah.
Big woods, big woods. A lot of beaver. There's some beaver ponds, but everything's froze solid, so you can ride right across. I mean, that cold.
Huh.
But anyways, he had this stand. It was 13 and a half miles in there, and we get to the stand the first day, and he says to me, he says, when you come out tonight, I want you to leave your gun in the tree. We were just in a tree with some canvas around. That's all we had. And I had a suit that was good for 100 below, and the good thing I did because I'd have froze to death. But anyways, he said, I want you to leave your gun in the tree tonight. And I said, no, I'm bringing my gun out. He said, ain't nobody going to come in here and steal it, not 13 miles. And I said, I know that. But I said, no, I'm going to bring it out. So I did all week long. I'd put it in a soft case, put it on the back of the four-wheeler, and we'd ride out. So it went along the whole week, and I passed bucks up all week long. And there was one nice 8-pointer he was a nice 8-pointer. And I kept passing him up, and I said, no, I'm not going to shoot him. Maybe the last day I might shoot him. Well, it came down to Friday night, and I was going to be getting on the airplane Saturday afternoon. He said, I'm going to take you Friday night. He says, I'll come get you. And he says, hopefully you got one by then. And yeah, I probably will have. Well, I did it. Well, that Friday night, I could hear the four-wheeler way off in the distance coming to pick me up, and it was starting to get dark. And they had a pile of grain and stuff out about 80, 90 yards in front of me, and I'd seen tons of deer, a lot of deer. But nothing I wanted to shoot. So I'm putting my gun in the soft case, getting ready, thinking, well, he's going to be here in a minute and pick me up. It's dark now, and he's getting closer, and I can see the lights coming through the woods. And he has to go by the bait pile to get to me. And he drives up to the bait pile, toward the bait pile, and he stops. And I didn't pay any attention. I knew he was down there. I said, well, must be he's going to rebait the pile. Well, he sat there, and finally he come up through. And he says to me, he says, why didn't you shoot that deer? I said, shoot what deer? He says, I had my lights right on the biggest deer I've seen, he says, for 20 years, he said, down on that bait pile tonight. He said, he was right there, and I put my lights on him so you'd shoot him. I said, well, I saw a deer come in, but it was dark before you even got there, and I couldn't tell if it had horns or not. It was too dark. He said, this thing is huge. And he says, tomorrow's your last day. I said, yeah, it is. He says, you want to go another place? I got some other stands where you can go and shoot a buck. I said, no. I said, I'll come back here. He says, okay. And I said, I'll tell you what. I said, by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'll have a deer. How do you know that? I said, there's an 8-pointer here I would shoot tomorrow. And so he says, you're sure? I said, yeah. I said, okay. So he drops me off in the dark the next morning, Saturday morning, and I left it with him. I said, if you don't hear from me by 11 o'clock, come get me. But I said, by 9 o'clock, I'll have a deer. 10 minutes to 9, I got 2 bucks down on the pile. One's a spike horn. He'd been there all week long, and he could flop any big deer, tip him over just like nothing. How he did it, I don't know. And he wasn't scared of nobody. He was on the pile, and there was a 5-pointer on the pile with him. And all of a sudden, they picked their heads up, and they looked like that, and they both shot right out of there. I said, something big has got to be coming. So I stuck my gun out through the canvas and waited. In came that same deer from the night before. Oh, my God. Well over 200, that's all I can say is it's well over 200 inches. So I let him get up to the pile. He calmed down. He starts feeding. I said, well, this is going to be easy. boom, I shoot, and no sign of hitting him. He just whirls and he's gone where he come from. Boy, I don't understand this. So I get down and I go over by the pile, and I can't find any blood. Of course, it looks like a barnyard. There's been so many deer there. And I can't find any blood, so I went in the direction that he went, and then I started making circles, big circles. Never found no blood. So I called the outfitter, and I said, I just shot at that deer that I think you saw last night. And I said, there ain't no way I missed it, but I said, I can't find him. I'll be right out, he says, and we'll find him. Well, being right out was like 3/4 of an hour before he got there. So I kept looking for him some more, and I didn't find him. So I went back by the pile, looked to see if I could find where my bullet hit, and I couldn't see that either. So I might as well go get back in the stand. So I walked back to the stand, which is 90 yards away, get up in the stand. I no more than sit down, and I look at the pile, and there's an 8-pointer standing on the pile. I said, he had to have been standing there watching me. And I thought I was all wound up about that big one, and I said, that's got to be the same one. So if I missed the first one, I shot over him, so I'm going to shoot under this guy and see what happens. So I shot for the very bottom of his belly. I broke his back. And down it went. And so I get down, I go over there. It's not even the same 8-pointer. So it's a smaller one. It was a nice 8-pointer, but it wasn't a nice 8-pointer. So I get over there, and oh, Jesus, now what am I going to do now? So pretty soon I hear him coming, and he gets over there, and he said, he said, you found your deer. I said, no. I said, well, what's that deer? I said, I shot him after I talked
my
to
gun
you.
was.
You can't shoot two, he said. I said, I don't think I shot two. He said, what do you mean? I said, I don't think I hit the first one. Well, we're going to find out. So he looks around, and finally he finds my bullet hole, long ways from the pile. And he went looking for the deer, and you didn't hit that deer, I guess. So he says, you remember what I told you the first day about leaving your gun in the tree? I said, yes, I do. So we're going to take your gun, and we're going to shoot it, and we're going to find out if it was you or the gun. Okay. And so we put a target up at 40 yards. I missed it by that much, over the top of it. The scope was knocked just about off the gun. Oh. Riding, pounding for 13 miles every day.
Yeah.
I should have listened, but I did it, and it cost me a big deer.
No kidding. Huh?
Yeah.
Now Brent, you went to Saskatchewan or Alberta or one
Alberta.
of those, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I went to Alberta. I went to Saskatchewan. We hunted with the Indians up there.
Didn't you see a great big one or something
I
up
did
there?
in Alberta.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it was like what he was saying. I was walking down this pipeline, and this deer comes out, and I'm guessing he's a 180-inch deer. I don't know. He's just bigger than anything I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And he came out 2 days in a row in this same spot. So I got the idea that the next day I'm going to go down there, and there's no stand. And the guy just drops me off, and I was walking into this place.
Yeah.
And he had no idea that I would be down there. So I went down that afternoon. I made a brush blind down there, and the next morning he dropped me off. I got down there, and that deer came out right under the stand that I'd been sitting in the 2 days before.
That's the way it always happens.
Yeah, and he was, I never got a shot at him.
So while we're on this 200-inch topic, I'm going to switch gears away from killing them with a gun. And you had an instance when you were bow hunting Kansas with a 200-inch.
Yeah.
You wanna describe that a little bit? What took place and.
The very first year that my dad, he'd been to Kansas the year before, and he says we got to go out bow hunting, and I'd never been into any place like this. When I showed up out in Kansas, we got this guy. He gave us the property. He said just go do your own thing. You just set it up, and I brought my clamp on stand, and I was like, this is not going to be fun for 2 weeks. All there is fields in little baby strips of woods, and I was like, I don't like this. And I'll never forget it. The first day I went and I found an oak tree on the side of this brook, and I put a clamp on stand there and got it all set up. And we had 3-4 hours before it was dark, and he was gonna pick me up that night. And I'm sitting there and pretty discouraged because I was like, I can't do this for 2 weeks. Just sit here and not see anything. And you swear there's not a deer around. And all of a sudden it got to be like maybe 45 minutes before dark. And I look out into all the CRP grass, and it was like they boiled up out of the grass.
Yeah.
There had to be 30 deer
Wow.
in this field, and they're all over the place. And this 10-pointer, all of a sudden this 10-pointer was chasing a doe, and he brought her right by me. And I really wanted that 10-pointer bad. And I got ready. I drew back just as he stopped. All of a sudden he took off again after. And I drew back 3 times on the deer, and I never got a chance to get a shot at him. And he was starting to go away from me over this little knoll. And on the way out, we stopped at a Cabela's, and I bought this. Never knew much about it. It was a snort wheeze. I was like, what the heck? I grab it out of my backpack, and I'm reading the instructions on it. And I blow this thing, and that deer and that doe took off out of there like a shot. I mean, they were like, and I was like, that is the biggest piece of shit. Why did I buy this?
Yep.
And all of a sudden, on the other side of the brook, I hear this crashing coming. And I look down in the brook, and this deer is coming across. And he heard that, and he was sure this was his area.
Yeah.
He came up, and he got 90 yards from me, and he got to within 20 yards, and there was a little brushy tree, and I practiced drawing on the deer that came through there, so I knew I was ready. And the stand was rattling so much from me shaking. I cannot believe this deer.
Yeah.
And this deer I would dare say he was a 200-inch deer. And later here I'll tell you why I believe that. The deer got to that brush, and all he had to do was take one more step. I'd drawn back, and he stopped, and he put his head out in front of that brush, and all I could see were those antlers. And he finally took that step, and I never was looking through the and I didn't even have the pin on. I let the arrow go, and it went so fast. I mean, I was sure it went right through him, and he took off on a dead run and out of sight. And sat there, and I could see the arrow lit up down at the bottom. And probably 45 minutes later, a half hour later, I got out of the stand, and there was not a drop of blood on it.
Oh, dang.
And I mean, I was soaked from the adrenaline of that deer.
I believe it.
And come to find out, we were hunting where I had this stand. The property that it was butted up against was a guy that had shot like 8 200-inch deer that had his own food plots at this time. This was back... I had to be 15, 18 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember you talking about it and saying that it was just 100% buck fever that you missed. And
no question.
Tell them about the one you got in the soybean field with your muzzleloader that you snuck up.
Oh, that was in Kansas.
Yeah, that was in Kansas.
That was in Kansas. Yeah, that was we were out there.
You were in the same tree, weren't you?
No. This was a completely different
area. I remember
area.
the tree you were in.
Yeah. This was a different area. Actually, June was with me.
Yeah,
and
she was.
We had 2. I'd set up 2 clamp-on stands.
Your June is your wife?
My wife.
Okay.
Yep. And we were sort of hunting together, so 'cause it was sort of new to her. And we had a couple of big bucks coming into that place. And this was muzzle loading, so
early September.
September, hot. And we'd been there for 4 or 5 days, and I just happened to look out in this soybean field behind me. And the soybean field was 3 miles across it and 1 mile long.
Wow.
And I just happened to look out, and I saw something shine, and I had binoculars. I grabbed them out of my pack, and I look out, and it's a nice buck.
I guess it was.
He's walking out across it, and he got into the middle of this field, and I watched him lay right down. And the only thing that saved me was the hill across, right in line from where the stand I was in. I mean, like, I'm talking 5 miles away, there was a dead tree on that hill, and he was dead in line with that.
Wow.
And these soybeans were, Oh, they were waist high or
They're-
higher,
Yeah.
and
And
Oh,
it
you
was
could see
90
the
degrees.
tip of his antlers when he laid down.
when he
or
laid
what?
down, I could see the tip of his antlers, so I had an idea where he was.
Was he out of velvet yet?
He'd just come out of velvet because I had him on camera the day before in velvet.
Okay.
So I told June, I says, we only had 1 day, 2 days left to go. I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to see if I can.
Yep.
I don't know if I can sneak up on him or not. And the wind was blowing just enough, and I went down and I got downwind of him, and came back at him, and snuck through these beans. And I'm like, I know he's right here somewheres. And I looked maybe 50 yards ahead of me, and I could see a spot that was open in the soybeans where it had been packed down.
Yep.
I said, yeah, I'm gonna sneak. I got down and I crawled on my hands and knees, and I was within 5 feet of him.
Yeah.
He never got out of his
No.
bed.
Really, you were that close to him? And
I
Yeah.
mean, the barrel was within
Almost touching with the
almost
barrel.
touching him when I shot him.
Yeah.
wow.
He had no idea I was there.
Nope.
But the soybeans were like squeaky with the wind. They were like squeaky, and I couldn't hear.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, the wind was in my face, and I walked right to him, and he looked so big. When
he was big.
He was a big deer. He was
Yeah,
a big
he
deer.
was.
He just laid there, and he never knew what had hit him.
It was 90 some odd degrees that day,
Yeah,
too.
we had to drag him across that bean
Yeah.
field out of those beans.
Oh, that
Took
was a job.
hours and hours.
It did.
Gosh.
But that was a pretty
Yep.
neat hunt, that one.
That sounds it.
Yeah.
Now that big one that you talked about in the previous story, was that a typical or non-typical?
That was a typical.
He was a 200-inch typical.
I'm telling you, I've never.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen pretty good deer, but I mean, it shook me. I mean, that
Right.
stand was rattling so bad. My knees. I tried to put my knees. I tried to put my knees against the tree.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just like someone hitting them with a ball peen hammer.
Yeah.
You know, it was. I couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked because a 200-inch typical is like a unicorn.
It's
It's like
Yeah.
that's like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
300-inch non-typical, right?
It had horn. I mean, there was just as perfect as could be, and
Yep.
wide, and just heavy. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. It's funny. I hear a lot of these podcasts that you guys do,
Yeah.
and it's true. There's the deer that you remember the most are the ones that you don't get.
You don't get. Yeah.
You know. That's there's one in Tupper Lake. The last year up in Maine, there was a deer. It bothered me. It still bothers me.
Let's talk about that one in Maine last year. What happened there?
I choked.
You cut his track and
Yeah, I got up there up in Maine. I had never been into this area other than we drove through it in the summer, and I sort of said, this is a pretty nice spot, and took off day before Thanksgiving. Drove up there, parked, and started down this logging trail. I don't know, mile and a half, and all of a sudden this deer, nice track, come across, and it's like, well, here we go.
nice track, as in
Yeah, I mean, he was a 200-pound deer easily.
Yeah.
And picked up the track and took off with him, and we went and we made quite a few circles. He was with the doe.
Yep.
And it was in some really thick stuff, and you couldn't see far. And I knew I was getting close to him. I mean, this was only a couple of hours after I picked the track up, but I knew he was right there because there's no way that doe was out of there.
Right.
And I poked my head out of this opening, and the doe, she's 50 yards from me, and she is looking right at me. And I turn and look, and he is right beside me, broadside in the brush, and nice. I mean, beautiful deer. And I picked up and shot, and when I shot, he went in the air, and he took off down through the brush, and I shot a couple more times at him.
Yep.
And got all loaded back up and went over there, and there was hair everywhere. And I followed that deer all day and never found a drop of blood.
Yeah.
Never found a drop of blood. And at 4:00 that afternoon, we were back within 50 yards of where I shot him, and I saw him again, but he was with the doe, and he was running. And I never got another shot. I went back the next day and followed him all day and never saw him again.
And he kind of lined out that day, right?
Yes.
I remember you
second day.
showing me your Onyx
Yeah.
track of like where you were, and you were not in a big acreage at
No.
all, and he was just in there with that doe.
Circling.
Yeah. That doe was ready, and he wasn't leaving her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that night, he went to the top of the mountain, And he spent the night up there, and then that next or evening or that morning or early morning, he was gone, and we just went straight line.
He was headed somewhere else.
Yeah.
Dang, that hurts.
That hurt. That really hurt. And it, I mean, I'll tell you the story. It's sort of funny. In Vermont, what was it? This first day, second day of Vermont season, I was hunting an area in Vermont, and
First day.
First day. It was the first day. I was hunting this area 3 miles back in dry ground and going through a clear cut, and all of a sudden a deer jumped, and I saw antlers, and I was like, shoot, or he's going to be gone. I shot twice, and I saw the ass go right over the top of him. And I got over there, and it ended up being a 4-pointer.
Hey.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
So and I mean, it was shoot or not shoot.
Yep.
And I honestly blamed the deer in Maine. What happened in Maine is I hesitated because I didn't want to make that mistake, because the year before I tracked when the second to last day of Vermont season, muzzle loading, only 2 days left, and I shot the wrong deer.
Yep.
And then saw the right deer.
And then saw the right deer dragging him out. He laid down 50 yards from me, laying down there.
Yeah.
Beautiful antlers. No idea I was there.
Oh.
And I'm dragging this 3-pointer that day.
Oh my gosh.
So that's but that's what it's about.
Yeah.
What was worse of a drag, that 3 miles out of that bean field in Kansas, or the 3.5 miles?
The 3.5 miles off the hill.
Yeah.
That was a long drag. First day of Vermont season.
Dry
and
probably drug that hide right off him. Did
oh
you?
Yeah. Joey got to me about the last quarter mile you got
perfect.
there.
Yeah, I got a good son-in-law award that day.
Right, I believe it.
Yeah, I was done at that point.
Yeah.
But I paid him back, and I helped him out in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Cool.
That was a drag too.
Yeah.
Good dragon buddies.
Yeah.
I had a similar occasion out in Kansas, Iowa. I was at Timber Ghost Ranch hunting with them one year, and they put me in a spot the first thing in the morning at daylight, or dark. I put me in the dark, and they said, you sit here till 9 o'clock, and then you go through that patch of woods, and you're going to come to a soybean field. And there's a ladder stand in that soybean field. And he said, there's a nice buck over there. I said, okay. So 9 o'clock, I get up and I walk through the woods, and I get over to that thing, and the wind's blowing, and I climb up in that stand, and the stand's going back and forth, and about 11 o'clock, I would say 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, out come 9 doe, nose to tail, and then here comes this buck he's talking about. It was a 12-point, and it's a 180-inch deer. And they're too far for me to shoot with a muzzleloader. They're way down below me in the soybean, and right behind me is this river. There's a river. And I knew they weren't going to swim that river. They were just looking for a place to lay down. So they go into the woods below me, and about 11 o'clock, 11:30, and I sat right there to the rest of the day waiting for them to come out. 4 o'clock, out comes the 9 doe. They come out, and they come right up in front of me into the soybean field, and they start feeding me. Where is this buck? Where is this buck? Well, about 15 minutes later, here he comes, and he's coming right to me. And he comes up in front of me. It was 104 yards to him from where I was sitting. And the wind is blowing, and you're hanging on, and the stand's going back and forth. And I aimed the best I could, thinking, well, I still get him. Well, I shot, and I hit him, and I knew I hit him, and he went this way, and all the 9 doe went that way. And just the other side of the soybean field was all these whips where they'd cut this off, and he went into that, and I couldn't see him. And it was starting to get dark. So I got down, I went over there where I shot, and there was blood everywhere. And I said, well, he ain't gonna go far. So I started into the woods, and I didn't go 50 yards, and he had laid down already, and it was red with blood. So I backed right out, and I called Mike Hines, the guy that runs Timber Ghost, and I said, I just hit that big deer, and I said, I don't think he's going anywheres, but He said, don't chase him. He said, I'll be out to get you. And he said, we'll look at it. So we go to where the deer had bedded. And he looked at that. And he said, that deer ain't going to go nowhere. But he said, let's leave him tonight. It's dark. He said, let's leave him. We'll get him in the morning. And Harold Torrey was with me, and he had shot a deer that day at another place of theirs. And so we all go back the next morning, bright and early, thinking, well, we're going to find this deer. They get on the track. I can't see blood, so I got off to the side in case he jumped up or something. And we went till noon, from dark till noon. Finally, we ran out of blood. They ran out of blood. He said, I don't understand this at all. He said, all the blood that deer lost, he says, and he said, I'd have bet he wouldn't go nowhere. And he said, we don't know where he went. So I ended up going to another place and hunting on one of their farms. I went and I hunted another place, and I don't know if I shot one or not. I don't even know. But anyways, I get home, and about 3 weeks later, he calls me. And he says, hey, you know that deer that you shot, that big deer that you shot? Said, he's back in that same soybean field with them 9 doe. I said, he's alive? He said, he don't even show a sign of being hit. And he's back there. There's a 12-point. I got a picture upstairs of him.
No kidding.
Anyways, so he says he's fine. Well, that next year comes, and of course I couldn't go back to Iowa because I didn't have any points. So another guy does the very same thing that I did to the same deer, and he didn't get him either, and he lived again. So the third year, a guy shoots him, gets him, and I said to Mike, do you know where the bullet holes were that when I shot and when this other guy shot? He said, yeah, we do. He said, both you guys hit him in the brisket.
No kidding.
And he said he was fine. You never know it, but he said there was 2 bullet holes. You knew the bullets had gone in the brisket. 186.
Really? That's what he... Oh,
I got a picture of it. It was a 12-point, perfect 12-point.
No kidding.
Tons of that long.
They say some of those big ones, like especially around like suburbs and whatnot. Like I know you hear Sequel guys talk about it a little bit, that some of those bucks that they shoot have been shot multiple times before.
Yeah.
Well, this one here got shot twice, I know of, and finally the third time did him in. But
look at the one up by us there this year.
Which one?
That big one that the guy got right there by the house. That had an arrow in him. Had an arrow in his back. Gabe.
Oh yeah.
It had a
in the back strap.
Right in the backbone.
Oh, in the backbone.
Yeah, had a broadhead stuck in there.
Yeah, that great big one that Teddy Mayo killed up there a couple years ago in New Hampshire. That 170 some odd. That had a broadhead in it too. That was a huge, huge typical, huge typical.
But
yeah, I'm sure a lot of big ones get.
I shot one year in New York, over in New York with an arrow, and I knew I'd hit the deer, and I didn't get him. And we went back for rifle hunting, and my brother-in-law shot the deer. And he called me, and he says, I got a deer, he said. And so I said, well, leave him right there. I'll come over. I'll go get my four-wheeler, and I'll pull him out for you. So I get over to the deer. I look at that deer. That's the deer I shot with my arrow, my bow and arrow. He said, you didn't hit this one. He said, this one here was fine. When we opened him up, there was that much of the arrow in him.
No kidding.
And he was fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah.
Funny story.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine, Matt, shot a deer. I don't know, it was 4 or 5 years ago. Same thing with a with a bow.
Yep.
Deer got away from him, and he knew that the deer took his arrow because he only found part of it.
Right. That's all I
Well,
found.
in New Hampshire, you have to have your name on your fletching.
You do?
Yep. You have to have
I
your
didn't know
name, your
that.
number, and whatnot on your fletching. And later that, I think it was like January or something, guy showed up on Matt's door and said, hey, I got something that belongs to you. And that guy had killed the buck, and it was his fletching. It was healed over in that deer.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
pretty
is
interesting.
unbelievable.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Yeah.
I guess so.
Yeah, he'd killed it with a gun later that year.
Son
Dressing
of
it
a
out.
gun. Wow.
Yep, pretty neat.
They can take an awful shot.
They sure can.
Yes,
so you guys hunted the North quite a bit before you started to experience the Midwest. New Brunswick, Northern Maine, Ontario. Out of those areas, what did you Montana? What did you guys like the most? Did they all have their
Probably, as far as myself, I would say that Ontario was probably the most fun.
Yeah.
Because there was so many deer, and I mean, you could take a track, and I mean, there was one day I remember we were in, I think it was called Vermilion.
Yep.
There was a deer that had crossed the track, and he was driving. We had a buddy with us, Jerry, and this deer had crossed the track, and it was snowing like a son, and they were calling for a terrible storm to come in, and I said, "Drop me off. I'm gonna follow this deer." He and Jerry, they dropped me off, and I said, "I'll see you pick me up tonight or whatever." I mean, they had not gone 15 minutes, and that deer had just gone in, and I walked right onto him, and that was a 200-pound. That was an 8-point there.
No kidding.
Walked right onto him, and then we ended up being stuck in the motel for 3 days.
Yeah,
That was
because of the
it was a
snow.
blizzard, and they couldn't get the roads plowed.
Couldn't even plow the
Really?
roads.
Wow.
But yeah, and that, I mean, but it was like that every year. I mean,
Yeah.
how I met Joey's is sort of funny. I met Joey's father, I think, before I met Joey.
I did too.
Right, yeah,
That's where I met him up there.
I wanted to get into that
Yeah.
whole story, how you guys are all related here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
Tell the story.
you want to start with the first year that you went with us?
Well, yeah, the first year, you know, that I guess I met you, but I didn't know you. You guys were up there, and that must have been 07 or something like that. And I believe the reason we went was because of you guys, right?
Well, I think you went with Chip Percy.
Yep.
That was because we all flew out, right? The
We
four
all
of us.
flew out. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Alan, Chat.
Yep.
No.
No.
Me, Al, Chip, and I think Matt went.
Yeah, Matt. Yep.
Yep. And that was the first year. And that was I mean, that was the first time I'd killed a 250-pound buck,
Yeah.
you know.
They're there.
Yeah,
for
no,
sure.
No, it was
Then-
that was good. Then leading into that, we started hunting a different area. And I think that was 09, right?
Yeah,
Did you guys go 08?
Oh yeah, we started
We went
going every
every
year
year.
after.
Yeah.
Once we got up there,
Yeah.
and I think it was
I think it was 09. Me and Jamie just started dating,
yeah.
and
And Jamie is
my wife, his daughter.
My daughter.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. And I don't know if I knew you were going or not going or
Yeah.
what. I don't remember.
I mean, we didn't know one another. We didn't really have
yeah.
any connection.
Yeah. And we'd only been dating for a couple months
Yeah.
or something like that. And
Yeah, we all
Wild Man was with me, and we were hunting a place.
thought we were alone. Thought it was a hot spot that nobody would know about.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And
Everybody knew about it.
yeah. And well, I'll let you. I wasn't there,
Yeah.
but
I mean, that was like you said, probably 2009. We were on this road that you had to. It was gated, and the year before, we were walking in,
Yeah.
and we got the idea that we're going to bring bicycles.
Yep.
And pedal bikes. There was no electric bikes back then. You know,
Right,
there was no
right.
such thing.
Yep.
And we brought these old junk bikes. If the worst came to worst, you leave it. And
Yep.
and I remember the first day there, I went back in, and it was 6 miles on this road, and I had picked a spot on Google Earth that I was like, this looks like the perfect spot, and it was probably a mile back in off from
You
the road.
set me up.
Yeah, I'd set you up there
Yeah.
also in another spot there. And I'd walked into this spot with my stand, and I mean, I'm getting to this spot right where I want to be. And all of a sudden, here comes this guy wearing a Beagle jacket. And I was like, how is this possible? How did this guy get in here? And I says, I know he's a Vermonter. I mean, it's
The Beagle way.
Beagle. He comes over, and I was wearing a Beagle jacket, and he's
Yep.
Vermont. I said, yeah, Vermont. And he goes, well, he says, we're from Stowe. I said, well, I'm from Milton. I said, my daughter just started dating a guy from Stowe. He goes, well, my son just started dating a girl from Milton.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, and we're in the middle of the nowheres.
Yeah,
Right, we
And
were.
we talk for, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, and I only had to go a little further, and we leave, and we separate, and sort of funny story, and go to this point and get up where I want it to be, and I'm got my clamp on stand. I'm dragging it up the side tree, and it sounds like antlers rattling.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, here comes this buck. And it was a 10-point. He come running in, and bang! I grabbed my gun. I went back down to the bottom of the tree, got my gun, shot it. His dad heard me, came back and helped me drag that deer all the way back to the road.
Did for mine too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was a pretty interesting story.
It
of how
was.
we could meet that far away.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Oh, we got to take a battery break real quick. All right, we're back from the battery break. So you shot the buck right after you met.
After
Joey's
I
father.
ran into Joey's father.
Yep.
And it was maybe within, like I said, 15, 20 minutes of him leaving. And next thing I know, here he comes. He comes walking back. And we actually got to spend the day together. He helped. I mean, it was so hard. We'd made these little carts to put behind the bike. And, and oh, my God, I remember bringing him out of there. And of course, they were bikes that the wheels were maybe an inch wide.
Oh, these were like cheap bikes.
Yeah, they were cheap, all right.
Yeah. I remember
Throwaway bikes.
I remember seeing you go down the road with one of your bucks, and Brent pushed you to get going.
Yeah.
And once you got going down that hill,
I couldn't have stopped if I wanted to.
No.
But I couldn't go up the other side. That was the problem.
Yeah.
By the time we got back to the car, which was like 6 miles,
Yeah.
there was nothing left of the bike, nothing left of them.
Wheels were slapping against the frame.
Everything was shot. We just thrown it in the ditch and left it there.
Yeah.
And took the deer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
That was a pretty
that
good
was
place. That was one of my favorite places, as you were
It
asking
was.
about.
Yeah.
Those were the days that we were spoiled. We were at the time when there were so many deer up there, and great times.
Yeah.
That's a reoccurring theme.
And Maine had sort of disappeared at that time. You know, we had. I mean, I was
Everybody was going to Ontario.
Yeah, everybody had stopped going to Maine and started showing up in Ontario.
Everybody was following the Benoits.
Yeah.
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 They were all out there, and everybody, wherever they went, that had to have been good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Where they went, green plates followed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Now, you guys hunted Montana for a number of years, right?
13.
Yeah. And you guys hunted the big woods of
Yes.
Montana,
Yes.
the western side of it.
Yeah, from the northwestern area.
Yeah.
All big woods. I mean, just a huge.
There ain't no small woods
There's
out
no
there.
small woods. No, no. In the mountains, we're straight up or straight down.
Right.
Yeah.
But a lot of deer. I mean, before, and I think it was 2006 that they had 2007. No, probably 2006 time frame is when they had a terrible winter. I mean, the year before, I'll never forget this. I had killed a deer. I'd seen 374 deer in 10 days, and I killed the 75th buck that I'd seen.
Oh my
Really?
gosh.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's the way it was. I mean, you'd find a place where they were the whitetails were on the bottoms and the mule deers were up top.
No kidding.
Really?
And I mean, these river bottoms were full of deer.
Was there cuts on these mountains or?
Very little. I mean,
Yeah.
there were some, but not
a lot.
No,
Not a lot.
But the river bottoms were just. I mean, they were open and you could see forever. And I mean, that's where I learned rattling.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd rattle and you'd have 5 bucks come.
Yeah. Oh,
Before you could put your horns down.
Yeah.
Really?
They
were
be
there.
that quick. I missed a deer, a beautiful deer, because I still was holding on to horns.
Oh my god.
no kidding.
I was still holding on to horns. He came that quick.
Okay, so this brings back. You told me a story once. When you bought your license, the guy told you if you're going to rattle.
Mm-hmm.
What did he tell you?
Hey, that was probably about the second year we were there. He said, if you're going to rattle, you back yourself up to the biggest tree you can find because you're going to have mountain lions all over you.
Wow.
And I was it's
I never
sort of
experienced
funny.
that, but-
And I did. I was in this river bottom and I'd rattled, and I mean it was a fresh snow, so everything was covered. There was no tracks at all when I went in there. And I'd rattled, and I'd seen some bucks come in, but they were really spooky, and I knew it wasn't me. That there's no way. And after an hour or so, I got up and I decided to take off, walk around the back of the tree, and there's a mountain lion track.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he came right up
Yeah.
behind me. And while we were there, there was I remember this on the guy telling us that a 6-year-old girl had got taken out of their yard by a mountain lion.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was as close as I've ever come to a mountain lion. But we had a buddy from Waitsfield that went with us.
Yeah.
And it was sort of funny. He talked about it the whole trip out as we were flying out. That didn't want to see no mountain lion. He scared. I don't want to see a mountain lion. I'm scared to death of them things. And it was probably the first day. I mean, my father was driving.
It was early.
We had radios. We had our race car radios from the race cars, which would reach 2-3 miles, 4 miles in the mountains.
Wow.
From the village to where we were hunting was 30 miles back in.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Every day, morning and night.
Wow.
30 miles.
And these radios would work
Oh,
great.
they worked fine because you were so high.
Yeah. And he was the first guy we dropped off. And I ended up being the second guy, and my dad and the other guy continued up the road. And, I mean, we hunted a couple hours, and all of a sudden on the radio, I hear this, and he is huffing and puffing, and he's like, you better get your ass down here. And I'm telling you, be careful when you walk in. I just had one of the mountain lions attack me. I said, come on, Dick. I said, there's no way. He said, I'm telling you, you be careful. So I come down out of this woods, and just shit luck is all it was. I come out and I hit the road, and he's probably 2 miles, 3 miles down this road from me. And this lady and her husband were coming down through in an old pickup, and they said, where are you going? I said, I need to go down the road here ways. And I jumped in the back, and drops me off, and of course I can pick up Dick's track. I start walking in, went in there a ways, and all of a sudden I look up on this ledge, and there's Dick standing up on the ledge. and he gets on the radio. He says, right there. He says, right where you are is where I shot that thing. And I turn and look, and I was like, holy cow, there's a mountain lion laying there dead.
Really?
Yeah, and it was within 5 feet of where he was standing.
Holy shit!
And he didn't place it. So,
Oh my!
Was he worried that it was gonna attack him?
Yeah,
or
He
something?
was all crouched down, ready to jump.
Yeah,
When he happened to see him.
He started to walk by him.
Yes.
And he got that feeling that something was wrong and something was looking at him. And he was on a deer trail, which was probably a little bit of a mistake to be.
Wow.
And this cat was sort of above him a little bit. And he said when he knew something was wrong, he turned. And when he turned, the cat was all crouched up, like Father said. And he opened his mouth and screeched. And when he did, he just turned and shot, and it went right through the mouth and right out the belly of the cat.
Wow!
And you see his tracks where Dick he ran, he ran like a scared girl. And you can't shoot mountain lions out there. It's like, what are we going to do now? We got a dead mountain lion, and you're supposed to have marks. I mean, that's what all the locals say. Make sure you got marks if you kill one.
Right.
But go ahead and kill them. They want everything dead. They want them dead.
Really?
So we over the years, me and Dad had found these. We met some of these Indians.
He was an Indian taxidermist.
Yeah, and we called him up and said, "Hey." It was sort of funny. We pulled him out that night and had him in a bag.
Yeah.
And we threw him over the bank at a mile marker.
Yeah.
And that night, that's the first time, and probably the only time we've ever been stopped in Montana by the wardens.
No shit.
Yeah. We got stopped that night. And
You just ditched.
we just ditched this guy. And we're like, so we head down and we go and find this taxidermist and said, hey,
He was an Indian.
You can have anything you want, right? Yeah. So we go down to the reservation, meet this Indian taxidermist, and he says, I'll go get it, and he says, I'll mount the cat for you, and if you want it, and the Dick says, he says, I'll take it. He says, I want that cat. So that night, the next day, we see the guy, and he'd gone and got the cat, and we hunted the rest of the week. I mean, Dick took a couple days off, I think.
I think he was scared to death.
Yeah, he didn't leave the motel for a couple days, and then he got back into it.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was scary.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like it after I knew it was dead.
Yeah.
So we hunted and we saw it. We saw a lot of. I mean, you shot deer every year. I mean, and some nice, beautiful deer.
Yeah, you've killed some nice ones.
Yeah,
up there.
long
Really nice.
tines. Just that Montana deer.
Yep.
Well, to tell the end of that story quick, Dick calls me one day. I was selling trucks in Mack trucks at the time, and he says, "Come on down." He says, "My cat's coming in by a truck freight." I said, "Oh, cool." He said, "I want to see it." So we get down there, and it's in this big crate, and we unload it. We put it in he has a nice game room, and we put it in there. And that night, he calls me up. He says, I don't have my cat no more. I said, what do you mean? He says, after we left, he says, I went back, you went to work, and he says, I went back down to the office, and he says, I left my boxer there, the dog. Dog bit the face right off his cat. His $2,500 cat.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Right.
Didn't last 15 minutes at his house.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but those were the times that I'll never forget. We had so much fun out there, and
Yeah.
It
and
was.
there was a lot of game.
What?
And then that year that I was telling you about, we had a bad winter. And like I said, I believe it was 2006. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Me and him are the only two that went back because we were told that don't come back. The deer, we lost 80% of our herd, and we're like, we already had everything. We'd bought our tag, and we went back, just me and him.
Right.
And we hunted for 10 days. I don't think I saw 10 deer.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you were going through the woods and walking through the woods and stuff, you were finding deer 6-8 feet up in trees. The bones, the skeletons, where they got hung up. There was so much snow, they got hung up on the limbs when it thawed.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get off them.
Wow.
Yeah, and you were finding deer. It was awful. It was everywhere.
The first year I ever went out there was long before that. But my brother and I and Mike Berry, we decided we wanted to go to Montana. Didn't know nothing about Montana, but decided we wanted to go out there and we wanted to do our own thing. So we just picked a name in one of the books of an outfitter that lived in Montana. And we called him and we said, is there any way that we could meet you somewheres and you could take us and put us in a spike camp back in the mountains and leave us with a cook, and we do our own thing? This was the very first time now. And he says, yeah. He says, I got a place. He says, I'll pick you up. He says, I'll pick you up by the airport. I'll drive you to this place. You're going to be back in 30 miles. And he says, when we get in there, he said, you're gonna be in a spike camp. And he said, there's going to be a cook there, a kid that does the cooking. That's all he's going to do. And you're going to be on your own. And you have the whole mountain range to yourself. That's what we want. We had no idea what we were doing. But anyway, we did that. We got in there, and I was scared to death from the time we left the village. You're going up this mountain, and you're going around these bluffs. And it's straight down for 2,500 feet. And it's snowing, and his tires on his Blazer were bald. And I said, oh, Jesus, we ain't never going to make it. I was scared to death. We finally got to the spike camp, and he says, it's down over the bank right here by the brook. It's okay. So we get down there, and I'd never been in a spike camp before or anything like that, and it was nice. It really was nice. Nice and warm, hay on the floor. Then we had another camp over here to eat out of, and out back was a corral for a donkey. And so we get in there about 10:30 at night, snowing like a son of a gun, and I had no idea where the hell I was. And I knew I just wanted to get out of that thing. I didn't want to go over the bank. But anyways, we get down to the camp, and we get in the camp, and he says, before we go to bed, he said, I'm going to draw you guys some maps of what this territory looks like. So that'd be a good idea. So he said, the road that we come up on, he said, it only goes 2 more miles, and it's dead end. There's no more road. And he said, you're going to be almost to the top of the mountain. Up there, he says, you're going to find elk. You're going to find moose. He says, halfway down, you're going to find mule deer. And he says, down here by the river, you're going to find whitetails. I said, before I go anywhere tomorrow morning, I'm going to see the sun come up and figure this place out. Yeah, he said, that's okay. So next morning we get up, we have our breakfast with the guy. And I said, I'm going to go to the top of the mountain. Bobby says, well, I'm going down by the brook. And Mike Berry says, well, I'm going halfway up for the mule deer. So, okay. So we all went different directions. And that night, it had snowed probably that much, but it's the snow isn't like ours. It's a dry snow, and there's nothing to it. So I walk the 2 miles up to the end of the road, and I get up there. I get way to the end of the road where there is no more road, and quite a lot more snow up there. Well, anyways, I'm standing there at the end of the road, kind of looking up on this ridge up above me, and there's a noise coming off me. I never heard this noise in my life. What the heck is that? And it kept making this noise, and I couldn't see it. I'm scoping with my scope and looking, and finally I went over underneath a big spruce tree, and of course it was all bent right over with snow, and I get under that tree, and I'm still scoping, and all of a sudden I come to a cow elk. Whoa, there's the noise right there. So she's looking right in my direction, and she's a long ways away. She's 500 yards away. I don't know, 400. I don't know what it was. Long ways. Anyways, next thing I know, there's 2. Then there's 3. Then there's 5. Ended up being 9.
Wow.
And the last one to stand up, I had a tag to shoot an elk if it had horns, any horns, back then. Well, this guy had spikes about that long, the last one. I look at that. There's an elk right there, and I can shoot him or shoot at him. I didn't think I was ever going to hit him. I had a 30-06 pump. And so I aimed the best I could, and I shot it. I saw him flinch. He just stood there. Whoa, I said, I had to hit him. I pumped it, boom, and I ended up shooting 5 times. And I shot 4, and he still stood there. He never moved. And I said, Jesus, I know I hit him the first time, but why don't he move? So finally I said, I'm going to go just above him. I went just above him a little bit, like I pulled the trigger and dropped him right there. I said, I got an elk first morning. So it took me 20 minutes to go down through all the snow and then go back up that hill. And when I got up to him where he was laying, the other 8 were still going up the hill, all cows. They were going up ahead of me. And I get up there, and Jesus, now what am I going to do? So I said, maybe I can move him. Well, I couldn't move him to hit that wall. So I said, I got to do something. So I said, I'll go back to the camp. And there's a vehicle down there. We can drive that up. It's 4-wheel drive. But when I left this morning, I saw a donkey in the corral out back. And I didn't know anything about donkeys. And come to find out, he was a pack donkey to take packs, stuff up to hunters. So I get back to the camp about noon when I get back there, and the kid says, what are you doing back here the first day of hunting season? I said, I shot an elk. No, he said, you didn't shoot no elk. I said, I shot an elk. No, he wouldn't believe me. I said, well, I'm trying to tell you that I did, and I need some help. And he said, well, what are we going to do? And Jesus, I don't know. I said, does that donkey, does he work out back? I mean, does he really? He said he'll put stuff on his back, and they take it up for other hunters. But I said, could we put a saddle on him? Could we put a saddle on that donkey and then hook a rope to the saddle and have him pull that elk to the road? It's probably going to be 400 yards, 300 yards. And he says, I don't know if he'd pull it or not. He says, we can try it. So the first mistake was trying to put the saddle on the donkey. I thought he was going to kill both of us. Bite and kick. Oh my God. We ended up knocking him down and on. We roped his legs up and put the saddle on him that way. We let him up, and we hooked him to the trailer ball of the 4-wheel drive that was there, and we drove up the 2 miles up through into the snow, and he followed us right up through. Walked him over to the elk, hooked him on. He walked right back with that elk just like nothing. So we dragged him all the way down through in the snow, and we get to the camp, and we dragged him down over the bank, and we couldn't pick him up because we had no way of picking him up. We hoisted him up the best we could, but he wasn't off the ground next to the donkey. And So we left him. We said, tomorrow we'll take him down to have him butchered tomorrow. So that night, we're in the camp, and the donkey's going crazy out there. He's whinnying and hollering, and nobody, not a one of us would get up to go see why. So the next morning, I says to the cook, I said, what the hell was the matter with that donkey out there last night? He said, I don't know. He's never done that before. So we go out. A cougar had followed the blood trail all the way down to where we took him down over the bank to the corral, and that's as far as he came. He wouldn't come down. Of course, the donkey knew he was there, and he kept whinnying.
No kidding.
So he said, we got to get him out of here today. And we did. We took him out of there today, but the cat never did come back.
No kidding.
But that was quite an experience.
I bet it was. So we're sitting here. You've got a cat right here.
I have a cat. I shot that one in Idaho, about 8 years ago, I guess it was.
What was that like?
Well, it was the hardest hunt I've ever been on in my life. It took us 8 days to get this cat. I went out with this guy out there hunting, and first thing we did, we went back into the canyons with a snowmobile on snow, and you look for cat tracks. Well, we found where something had been killed and dragged into a hole. Well, come to find out, it was a cow elk, and this cat had killed it. And the first thing you do, they'll drag them to a hole, put them in the hole, and then they'll go feed on them after. So we found where the elk was. So we go down there, and of course, there's all these cat tracks. So he said, "Boy, this is perfect." So we go back and get the dogs, put the dogs on the track, and over the mountain they go. And that night, his dogs were. He could call his dogs back. I could not believe that. But they'd run all day, at about 3 o'clock, if he wanted to stop, he'd call them, and they'd come back.
Wow.
I'd never seen that in my life. Well, anyways, so they went over the mountain that night, got the dogs back. Next morning, we went and ran them again. They went across a couple mountain ridges, come back, and the cat went up a tree. And I was sitting back in the canyon in the truck because he said, you ain't going to be able to walk here. I couldn't even walk on the level because we were at 7,500 feet, and I couldn't breathe. I wasn't used to the altitude. And he was up higher than that. So anyways, he said, you stay here in the truck with the radio, and he says, if we get something, he says, where you can get it, he says, I'll call you. Well, I could hear the dogs barking, when they'd go by or whatever, and finally he calls and he says, can you hear the dogs barking? I said, yes, I can. I said, they're way up on top of the mountain up there. Yeah. He says, I'm with them. And he says, we have that cat up a tree. And he says, can you get here? I said, yeah, I can. I probably can get there, but it's going to take me a while. Yeah, he says, it's going to take you 3 hours to get up there. I said, yeah, I can believe that. Well, it probably took me at least 3 hours. And I got up there, and the cat's in the tree, and I'm coming up the side hill, and I can see the one lone tree the cat's in, and the dogs are right there at the bottom standing up, against the tree. And I can see the cat, and I'm still a little ways from him. And he said, come right up to where I am. And he was by the tree. So I get I get within 75 feet of the tree, the cat jumps out. And there he goes with the dogs. And I couldn't shoot, and he's gone. Well, that was the end of that day. Well, he gets the dogs back. We do the same thing. 2 days later, we do the same thing again. And I didn't get him that time. He jumped again. And finally, the eighth day, he went up a tree, and he stayed in it. And I got there. I got to the tree. He was under the tree. One of his dogs was halfway up the tree.
It's a good dog.
He was halfway up. He wasn't 4 feet below the cat.
Wow.
And the cat would look down at him like that, and then he'd look over at me. And I wasn't the length of this room from the cat. I was right. The tree's standing here, and the hill went up like that. So I come by him, so I was right perfectly level. And I said, I can shoot him right here. No, don't you shoot him, he says, until I tell you. I got to get them dogs out of that tree. One dog out of the tree. And he said, I got to get the others away because if you wound him, he's going to grab my dogs. And I said, okay, well, you tell me when. He got the dogs away. The one that was in the tree started down, and he fell, and he caught him. And he took him over to some bushes, tied him up, and finally he started back, and he got just lowest from the tree, and he says, okay, shoot him. Bang! I shot him. I want the length of this room.
No kidding.
And I shot him right through the heart
Yeah.
with a 7mm 08, and the bullet never went through that cat.
Wow.
We
How-
found
How big a cat is it? What do you weigh?
about 110 pounds. It ain't a big cat. It's a smaller cat.
Yeah.
But he had killed that elk, and in the third day into the chasing, he killed a buck mule deer. The same
Really?
cat.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I'll tell you, that was a hard hunt.
Yeah. Huh. No, it's rugged country too that they
It
live
is.
in.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. Yeah.
You guys think we got mountain lions back east?
Of course we do.
You think so?
Of course we do.
There's a guy sitting in this room right now that recently saw a photo of one. We won't say where.
I can show you some photos of some right here,
Really?
right close here.
Really?
I've seen them myself.
Yeah. I told him he was full of shit, but he swears to God it was
No.
100%.
There is. There is. Believe me.
He's talking about me. I saw a
There
photo the
is.
other day.
You
He
did?
saw a photo the
Yeah,
other day.
I did.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Game camera picture?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And the guy brought it, and it ended up on 2 or 3 other guys' neighbors on their cameras.
There's one right over here.
Legitimate
Oh,
trail
yeah.
camera photo
Absolutely.
of this
Absolutely.
thing. And
Yeah.
As real as real could
Yes.
be.
Big one?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Beauty. I mean, bigger than what I want to see.
in this area, too,
I
you'd
don't think
believe
they're
it.
going to bother you.
I'm not worried. I don't think they're going to bother us, but I think they're going to take deer.
Oh,
of course
yeah.
they're going. Of course they're going.
that's-
Of course
yeah.
they are.
They're going to eat whatever they can.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
Don't really need them in the area.
No.
No.
We've got enough bears,
I
We
know,
got
right?
more bears than we think we
Hunters.
got.
hunters,
There's enough of
bears,
those.
and coyotes.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I think if a lot of guys in this area saw a cougar track, they'd probably mix it up with a bear track, right? Because
Yes.
they're kind of similar.
Yeah. They're not.
in
They're not all
size.
that far off in size.
No,
I mean,
that's what I'm
especially
saying.
in the snow. In the
Right.
snow, they look.
I'll tell you
so.
something else we got. We got wolves.
You think so?
Yes, I know so because I saw one.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I saw it up on Lake Carmi.
Really? Well, they killed one up there a while back that was
This was
like,
Like-
confirmed to have.
Is that up
this was
near
like
Canada?
2 years ago.
Wow.
Me and my wife were going up to the gun shop, and I looked out on Lake Carmi. It was all frozen and everything, and there was this wolf. I said, boy, that's an awful big coyote.
Yeah.
She says, that ain't a coyote. And I said, no, I don't think it is. It was coal black. And I blowed the horn, tried to get him to stop, and he wouldn't. He kept right on going. He went right across the lake, walking.
Yeah.
So I go on to the gun shop, and I'm talking with the owner. I said, you can't guess what I just saw down on the pond. Yes, I can. He said, you saw a wolf. I said, how'd you know that? He says, I've seen him. He said, he's come down from Canada. Of course, they're on the Canadian
Yeah.
border.
Right.
And he says, but I never heard anybody. I don't know if anybody ever killed him. I probably can. I guess you probably can anyways. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what would they say? I mean, if it's
yeah.
you thought it was a
Yeah.
coyote,
Coyote,
right?
yeah.
Right.
If they're not supposed to be here.
I'm not sure I'd say anything anyways.
No, I mean, got a world record coyote, guys. 140-pound coyote.
Go get him mounted might be a problem.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Whoops. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So out of the 75 deer heads that are in this room, Beav, what one stands out to you the most?
I guess I would say that Saskatchewan one right there.
Yep.
I shot that in Saskatchewan, and it grosses 181, and that was a nice deer. But I've seen some a lot better than that, and like I told you, I missed that one that was way bigger than that one. But I like that deer there. But we've got some other deer in here that this one right here. Brent saw this deer. This is the New York deer. It was shot-
Adirondacks.
It was in the Adirondacks. And
Yeah.
he saw that deer the day before I ended up getting him, and we were trying to push it to him. And that was the second biggest deer shot in New York that year. It was in 1985. It dressed 237, and a guy from beat me with 245.
No kidding.
But that was a nice buck.
Yeah, that's a
You want to
beauty.
tell the story, like the whole story
Well,
on that buck?
he
guys
can
wanna
tell you better.
I mean, how it all started was we were over there. We were in a camp with a bunch of guys from New York. Actually,
Yep.
They'd asked us into camp and be a member with them, and it was a pretty big hill or mountain over there, and we had snow. Always had snow in that area. And remember getting into the woods that morning and found this track. I mean, and like I said, it was something that I started to really enjoy doing.
Yep.
Took the track and went, all day. And next thing I know, I ended up on the top of this mountain, and he got away from me through these ledges and went straight down. And it was late in the day, and it was like, and I saw him. I saw him the last thing just as he went over the hill, and I knew he was a big deer. And came back to camp, and I was telling my dad, I pulled him aside. I remember this plain as day. I says, "You ain't gonna believe the deer I saw today." I said, "This is a real New York deer." I mean, I said, "I can't imagine he wasn't being pushed that hard." I said, "We'll try it again." So I told him where this deer had went through these ledges, and he was going to go over and come in that direction, and I was going to go up the direction that I'd gone the day before.
Right.
And sure enough, I walked onto that deer again, and I never saw him. I saw the track.
Yep.
And I started following it, and I knew we were getting close. I was getting close to the peak, and I knew that he had to be very close. And I mean, it might have been 10 o'clock in the morning or something.
Just about.
Just about.
Just about 10 o'clock. Maybe. I don't even know if it was that early.
Yeah.
It might have been.
And I heard I heard the shot, and then it was that close. I mean, I'm thinking he's going to come running back to me.
Yeah.
Never saw him, and then that's where he should tell you the story of how the deer, where he ended up. I mean, we sort of had him pinned, and what happened.
He was. Yeah, I picked the track up. Well, he told me where the track was. I found the track, and he was going to go up the side of this mountain, or up the side of the mountain, and up on the top it was all kind of leveled off, but he couldn't go over the other side because it was sheer ledge. And he went up around to be up there when I drove him up. Well, I'm going up, and I'm holding on to the trees. It's that steep to get up, and I look up like that, and he's standing up there like that, looking down, and I can't see no horns on him. And I can see this deer, but he's looking down, and he's not moving a muscle. And all of a sudden, he moves his head, and it looked like the whole tree, like a tree moved. Holy Jesus, I guess he's got horns. So I'm down on the side of the mountain, and I'm aiming just like this. And I aim for the white patch, and that's right where I hit.
No kidding.
And I didn't know if I hit him or not, but he went over apparently backwards.
Yep.
And I called him, and I said, that deer should be running right to you, if you're up on top. Yeah, on top.
Right.
And a little while later, I said, did he come through? No, he said he didn't come through. So I kept going the way I was. He didn't go. He just went over backwards,
right there.
and he was dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then we dragged.
We dragged for like 5 hours.
Nice.
Oh, my God. I didn't think we were ever going to get him out of there.
No,
That's a good one.
that was a good New York deer for
It
sure.
was a nice
Yeah.
deer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful rack on him too.
For an 8-pointer, that was a nice day. He scores 138. That's what
Yeah.
it scores.
It's a giant.
And the other one side of it was the Saskatchewan one. That scores 142.
Yep.
Yep.
That's it, huh?
That's
Man,
all.
that thing looks
8-pointer.
bigger.
Yep.
Well, it's because he
142.
carries
Yeah.
through his tines.
Yeah.
Deceiving.
Yeah.
That's where you need like a water displacement measurement system,
Yeah.
you know, right? Just to,
Yeah.
have you ever heard of
Make up-
that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
like
yeah.
have like a big thing.
Yeah,
Yep.
big water and
Yep.
put it in and see how much it takes. and-
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because he'd score real well. doing
Oh,
that.
be way ahead of the other one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No comparison.
Well, he's good. I mean, his G2s and G3s are probably like almost 3 inches
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
way through.
yeah.
You know?
They are.
Awesome.
That mainframe 8-point right there, that came out of Iowa. And that scores 162.
Yeah, it's a beauty.
And it's a mainframe 8-point basically.
Mhm.
It's a big one.
Yeah, it was a nice deer. They had seen him 3 years in a row, and they had him on camera for 3 years in a row and never saw him alive once on their food plots. The very first time I went there, he walked right to me, and I got him.
So, as good of a race car driver as you were, and as well known as you are within the racing community, and correct me if I'm wrong, how many Hall of Fame? You're in the Vermont Hall of Fame.
I'm in 5 Hall of Fames.
5 Hall of Fames.
Yeah. And
how does racing compare to hunting?
it don't.
It don't?
It don't. I mean, I thought it did back. I raced for 42 years. I drove a race car for 42 years. And I had to race against my brother for 40. And that was the hardest thing we ever did because neither one of us would let each other win. We'd end up over the bank, both of us, every night.
Yeah.
But then Brent got into it, and it was quite a lot more fun then. But I was getting to the end of my career. I'd done it so long, and I had a lot of good days, and I had a lot of bad days. I won a lot of races. I won a lot of championships, and I raced at Daytona. I've raced at Dover, Delaware. I raced at Martinsville, Virginia. All them places, and I know some of the big name guys like Richard Petty. I raced against Dale Earnhardt.
Yeah.
And that didn't do nothing for me, but we could beat them when they come up here. We could beat them, but we couldn't beat them down there because they cheated too much.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So when they came up here, were you cheating too much, or?
We cheated a lot. We cheated a lot. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I had some good days and I had some bad days. But I did have, I won a lot of championships and a lot of races. But Brent won just as many as long as he was in it.
I did it only 30 years.
Only 30 years.
Yeah, 30 years.
Yeah.
Well, the last name is definitely known within the
Well,
racing
it was
community.
fun, and I met a lot of nice people along the way. We raced from one end of the country to the other, everywhere in Canada. We could race all up and down the eastern seaboard. We raced, and I don't think there's too many racetracks we've missed, but
No, that's for
it was fun doing it.
I remember one of the first times I met you, you said you'd get rid of all your trophies, which I don't think I've seen your trophy room, but I can understand how many you
I
got.
have about 500 of them.
You told me that you'd get rid of every single one of those trophies for one more good deer hunt.
I would. I would.
That
That's
says
cool.
something.
I would.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd rather have the deer hunting, and I don't even look at my trophies.
Yeah.
He's giving his away, and I'm going to start giving mine away.
Yeah, it's true.
It is.
It's true. It's funny. I remember when I was racing. I mean, I'm very competitive. I don't like to lose. And I think I really got into the deer hunting stuff. And I remember him always saying that I'd give up every trophy I had. And I was like, man, I was racing, and I mean, you were working every night. You're out there till midnight and gone every weekend, traveling and racing 2-3 times a week. And
I raced 5 nights a week.
And back in the day, like you said, he was. And I remember I was like, I don't see that. But the older I got, and the more into the hunting I got, it was like he's 100% right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I moved to the Northeast Kingdom here a year ago and had 400 trophies, and I might have kept 20 of them from championships or the Milk Bowl, all these big races that I won. Those are the only trophies I kept. The rest of them ended up in a dumpster.
No kidding.
I mean, they're nice, but they take up a lot of space.
They do.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to hand them down to Joey and Jamie, and they're going to throw them out anyway. So,
Yeah.
Cash is going to melt them
Cash-
in the gold.
Yeah, right.
yeah, that's right.
Right.
So, but he's 100% right. I saw that after 25 years of racing, 20 years of racing. I couldn't wait for. I mean, it killed me when we were racing in October. And everybody else,
me too.
And everybody else, October 1st, we're racing at the Milk Bowl, and everybody else is bow hunting.
Yeah, I know.
And it's like,
It's like an October wedding.
yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
What are you doing?
yeah,
Jeez,
exactly.
Now,
So
I got to ask you, your name. This got to be one of the best names I ever heard. Beaver
Well,
Dragon.
when I was about 15 years old, 14 years old, whatever, I worked in a garage out in the town of Milton where I grew up.
Yep.
I worked for this fellow that sold cars, and he had a gas station and greased cars, changed tires, whatever. I did that after school. And one night I was polishing a car. I think I was polishing one of his used cars or something. And his wife came downstairs, and she looked at me, and she said, "You work like a little beaver." And her husband heard her say that. And he says, he said, "I ought to call him Beaver." And it did, and it stuck ever since. Nobody knows me by my real name. And but I've had that for, 80 years.
Beaver Dragon's very cool.
Yeah.
You don't forget
I've had
it.
more
No.
people ask me
Yeah.
about that.
Did
Yeah.
you ever have like a half beaver, half dragon on your race car?
Oh, we've had a lot of different stuff on it.
Like, kind of like a beaver
We've had
dragon.
some stuff on there I can't even tell you about. Yeah.
Cool.
But I also think that was what helped him with racing and me with racing.
It did.
Was the name. Everybody remembered all the guys
Oh,
from the
yeah.
south. I mean, when
Dragon,
they
yeah.
came up here, like the Harvick or the Wallace or Wallaces or whatever, they had no problem talking to us because they knew him, and that
Daryl
it just made it easy
Richard
for us.
Petty and all them guys, they knew who I was right off. I said, they don't know who I am. And they knew who I was, and I know them better than I know you.
No kidding.
Yeah, and they don't forget. But I raced in Nashville, Tennessee one time. We went down to a race down there, and Daryl Waltrip lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and I hated Daryl. Oh, I just didn't like him at all. Who do I get park side up for 4 days? Daryl Waltrip. Oh, I said, it's going to be a long 4 days. Well, when I came away from there, I'll tell you, he won the race that day because he cheated like a son of a gun, but that's beside the point. And when I came away from there, he had helped me so much. I learned a lot from him. I learned how to cheat, some, but he knew he wasn't going to get beat by me. We didn't amount to nothing down there, but we had fun going down and trying.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And,
Yeah,
yep.
good days.
Well, we probably should wrap it up. You've got a book, Beef. What is the book?
The book is, it was a book on my life of racing. I like I said, I raced 42 years, and the name of the book is To Beat the Beaver. And there's some hunting stuff in there too. And it took us 5 years to write the book, which I didn't think it was going to take a week, but it took us 5 years because there's so much to write in the book and a lot of money.
Yeah.
And anyways, that book, I've just about sold about all I've got. I do have a few more, but anyways, it was fun doing it. I met a lot of nice people, and if I had to do it over again, I'd know some shortcuts this time.
There you go.
But it takes a lot of money to write a book.
I think you should maybe write a book about some deer hunting.
Oh my God, I don't know. I could, but no, I don't. I'd rather go after them.
The one thing that got the book done is we had talked about earlier his tree stand, the tree stand deal.
Yeah,
yeah.
I ought to tell you about that.
Yeah. Touch on
I
it.
raced it. I raced at Thunder Road on a Sunday, on a weekend. On a Sunday. Monday morning, I said, when I get home Monday, I said, I'm going to go up by Brent's house. There was a tree up there that I had put my tree stand in quite a few years. And I'm going to put my tree stand up and have it ready for October for bow hunting and stuff. So I didn't say anything to anybody Monday morning. I got on my four-wheeler, took my tree stand. It was a lock-on stand. I climbed up this old cedar tree, and I got up 25 feet in the top of it, and I reached for a limb on the back side to kind of pull myself up, and the limb broke off. And I went right out of the tree backwards. And the stand went in the wrong direction, I went the other, and I ended up landing on the back of my neck on a ledge.
Oh.
And it broke my neck right off in 4 places. 4 places my neck was broke off. My head here was down inside my shoulders.
Oh.
Broke both shoulders, and it broke my back in 2 places. And I laid there on the ground, and something kept telling me, go to Brent's house. Go to Brent's house. And I said, I can't go to Brent's house. There ain't nobody there. They're working. So I don't know how long I laid there, but nothing hurt because I was in shock. And not a thing hurt. So finally I said, I got to get up. I got to go home. So I got up. I walked back through the woods, got on my four-wheeler, and rode it back down here. Got off from it, went into the kitchen, and my wife had gone bowling. And so I called Brent at work down at Mac, and I said, I just fell out of that tree that I hunt up by your house. I just fell out of it. And he says, are you all right? And I said, I think something's wrong, but I don't think much. I'll call an ambulance, and I'll be right home. So I just stood there, and when the scanner went off of the ambulance, the town clerk, John Cushion, he's one of my best friends, he heard it go off, and he left immediately and came right out here. He walked through the kitchen door, and I'm standing here with my arm on the table like that, and my head right here is down here. And his face just went, blah. And Jesus, I look that bad. And he says, can you sit down? And I said, yeah. Sit down. He says, I want you to sit down. I said, okay. Well, in come the cops, in come the ambulance, in come Brent. And they went right for my neck. They put one of them blanket or collars on my neck. And he said, we're going to take you to the hospital. I said, I don't think I need to go to the hospital. You need to go to the hospital. So we go to the hospital, get down there, and they wheeled me in, of course, and they put me under, and I don't remember nothing. That afternoon, I woke up in a room, and I'm laying in this bed, and the doctor comes in. I didn't know him, and he says, hey, he says, I'm going to be your doctor. And he said, I need to ask you some questions about how you did this. He says, I've heard some stories, but he says, I want to hear it from you. So I told him just what I just told you. He said, you are some lucky. I said, what do you mean I'm lucky? He said, one little tiny bone spur and you're paralyzed for life. He said, you did everything you could do to get one, and he said, you don't have one. I said, well, wait a minute. I said, why don't you just tell me what is wrong with me? I said, nobody has told me what's wrong with me yet, and nobody's working on me. He said, I'll tell you what's wrong with you. He said, your neck is broke off in 4 places, and your head is way down inside your shoulders. Both shoulders are broke, and your back is broke in 2 places. And I said, I don't believe that. He says, well, you better, because he says it's true. I said, okay, if that's the case, why aren't you working on me? I'm going to tomorrow morning, he said. I'm going to put your neck back together tomorrow morning. Well, they did. 7 hours later, they had my neck back together. I have 2 10-inch rods in my neck, holding my neck together.
Dang.
Right now. And I've never had a problem turning my head or anything with them.
Wow.
And another thing, it was getting time to go to Kansas deer hunting. And we had already applied for Kansas. I had my license, had my airplane tickets. And when this happened, the guys called me and they said, what are you going to do now? I said, well, I'm going to give my license. I gave my license to somebody. I said, you take it. I said, I'm not going to go. I can't go. And I canceled my airplane tickets. So the doctor says, I want to see you in 7 weeks. Well, 7 weeks, Kansas's deer season was still going. So the guys, and ours was just starting here. So 7 weeks, I went back to the doctor, and he says to me, he says, I got to look at you. I'm going to x-ray you today to see how you're doing. And he did, and he says, I cannot believe how you have healed up. He says, you're 50% healed up already. And he says, I'm going to take your collar away from you today. And he says, you're on your own. You can do whatever you want to do. I said, can I go deer hunting? He says, yes, you can. He said, you can go tomorrow morning. And deer hunting was on here. I come right home. Of course, the old lady didn't want to hear that. She didn't want to hear that I was going deer hunting.
No tree stands.
So I got my guns out, and I left the house right here. I went up by his house, and I went till noon. but I couldn't hold my head up because that collar had been on there for 7 weeks. And my head kept falling down. I didn't have any strength, didn't have any muscles. So I give up that afternoon. I gave up, and I didn't get a deer. So the guys called, and they said, what did the doctor tell you? I said, he told me that I could go deer hunting. He said, you want to go to Kansas? I said, I don't have a license. He said, we'll get you a license. He said, we'll get a license for you. He said, you just get the airplane ticket. I said, okay. So I got the airplane ticket. They got me a license, and I went. Get out there. I shot a 10-pointer. And we had about 4 inches of snow that night. I shot the deer down in the hollow, and I'm going down to get the deer, see the deer, after I shot it, and there's a stump sticking up about that high, and I tripped on the stump, and I was going down. I knew I was going down, so I held my gun up so I want to hit my scope, and it broke my shoulders wide open again.
Oh, my gosh.
And Mr. Boy, that hurt that time.
Oh, man.
We stayed there 3 days, and then we all came home, and I went back to the doctors, and they reset them.
Holy smokes,
But
Beef.
I got my deer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
That was quite an ordeal. I mean, from then on, I've used a harness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's
something we all should
that's
do.
when the book was written.
That's
That's
yeah.
when
When
book
he
was
was
just-
when he was laid up here,
Yeah.
the guy, the author of the book, that helped write it with him, was
Bill
coming
Lauderbush.
here. Came nightly.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Every Tuesday night,
Yeah.
we'd wait every Tuesday night. We'd come up and
Yeah.
we tried to start out from. I started racing in 1955, and we tried to go from 55 to 56, 57, all the way up through.
Wow.
But the only problem we had was a lot of the guys I raced with had passed away, and you just can't put their pictures in that book unless you talk to the widows.
families,
No
Yeah.
kidding. Yeah.
They have to give you permission, and it takes time
Yeah.
and money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have any more of those books left?
I do have a couple of them books
Okay.
left. Yes, I do.
Good to know in case
Yeah.
people
Yeah,
want
I
them.
have a few left, and but I got rid of most of them. I think we had 2,500, 3,000, whatever it was, and
Nice.
yeah.
Good. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up. It's been a
Yep,
good
it's
one.
been a great one. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, thanks guys
Good.
for coming
Thanks.
on.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank
It was,
you for having us.
a good
Yeah,
time.
I mean, it was fun doing what we did, and I'm not going to quit yet.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yep. So.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Yep.